I never wanted to be a night guard. It just kind of happened. Bills were piling up, my last job had gone under, and I needed something fast. So when I saw the posting for an overnight security position at the Red Bluff storage facility in rural Nebraska, I applied without a second thought. The manager, a man named Mr. Griggs, interviewed me over the phone. He asked basic questions: previous work, criminal record, whether I could handle isolation. Then his voice shifted slightly before the end of the call. You'll be expected to follow a strict set of rules. Noncompliance leads to issues. He didn't elaborate. I thought he meant termination or some corporate policy nonsense. I just wanted the paycheck. When I showed up for my first shift, the facility looked like any other. Rows upon rows of steel units, numbered and padlocked. A small brick office at the entrance served as the control center. The air was dry, the silence unsettling. There were no houses nearby, no traffic sounds, just the wind rustling the high grass and the occasional chirp of a cricket. Mr. Griggs was waiting for me inside. He was tall, wiry, with a crooked tie and a stern look in his eyes. He barely offered a greeting, only gestured to a chair and placed a folder on the table in front of me. Read this. Memorize the rules. You don't want to find out what happens when you break them. I chuckled awkwardly, expecting some corny company handbook. But as I flipped through the folder, my amusement faded. The rules were handwritten, not typed. The ink looked old, faded in some places, smudged in others, as if it had been copied over and over again for years. 1. Never open Unit 117, no matter what you hear. 2. Between 1:33 a.m. and 1:44 a.m., do not look directly at the cameras. 3. If you see someone walking through the rows after midnight, do not approach them. Watch them until they disappear. 4. If you hear knocking, count the knocks. If it's 4, ignore. If it's 5, leave the facility immediately. 5. At exactly 2:12 a.m., turn off all lights in the office for 1 minute. Do not peek outside. 6. Never answer the phone after 3 a.m., even if it's Mr. Griggs calling. My stomach twisted. I looked up at him, half expecting a grin, a gotcha moment. He stared back with dead seriousness. You follow them. You'll be fine. I didn't know what to say. It sounded like some elaborate joke or a weird hazing ritual, but the look on his face told me this was no prank. Are these really necessary? I asked. I've had 6 guards in the last 2 years, he replied, still stone-faced. Only 2 stayed longer than a week. I took the job anyway. I needed it. That first night, I kept the rule sheet by my side like a Bible. The cameras were old, the monitor screen grainy. The facility was empty, just metal doors and silent shadows. I walked the perimeter with a flashlight, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. Nothing seemed out of place. I checked each row, made a note of any units with broken locks or signs of tampering. Everything looked normal. Midnight came and went without incident. But then I heard footsteps. It was faint at first. A slow, deliberate pacing between the rows. I froze by the office door, heart in my throat. I remembered Rule 3. If you see someone walking through the rows after midnight, do not approach them. Watch them until they disappear. I stepped outside quietly, staying in the shadows. There was a figure walking near row D. It was too dark to make out any details, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Tall, shoulders hunched forward, dragging something behind them. I stayed still. My instincts screamed to call out, to confront whoever it was. But I held back. The figure didn't look at me, just walked slowly down the row, turned the corner, and vanished behind Unit 117. I waited for a minute, then another. The air was freezing cold now, like it dropped 20 degrees out of nowhere. When I finally returned to the office, my hands were trembling. I checked the camera feeds, all blank, static. I tapped the monitor. The images returned, but the row I'd seen the figure in was frozen. Nothing moved. At 1:33 a.m., I remembered Rule 2. I turned away from the monitors. At first, I didn't hear anything. Then I felt a hum, low, vibrating in the air, like electricity running through the walls. The sound grew louder, then sharper, almost like whispering. It stopped at 44. When I turned back, all cameras were functioning again. I needed a break. I stepped outside for a smoke, still gripping the rule sheet like it could save my life. At 2:12, I rushed back inside. The lights flickered exactly as the clock struck the minute. I shut them off and sat in darkness, heart pounding. A scratching sound came from the walls. It wasn't a mouse, not that loud. It sounded like fingernails dragging along metal. I clenched my eyes shut. The second the clock hit 2:13, I flipped the lights back on. The sound vanished. I didn't sleep when I got home. I kept running through everything in my head, trying to find a logical explanation. Night 2 was worse. It began with the cameras going out at 11:47 p.m. This time I saw something crawl across the screen just before it blacked out. Something low with too many limbs. I rushed out with my flashlight, but saw nothing. At 12:28 a.m., I heard the knocking. It came from somewhere near Unit 34. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. I exhaled, then a pause, and a fifth knock. I stood frozen, the rule echoing in my brain. If it's 5, leave the facility immediately. But I didn't. I didn't believe. I thought it was someone playing tricks or maybe a glitch in my brain from lack of sleep. Then I heard something whisper my name. Not yell, whisper, from the road just outside the office. I grabbed my keys and sprinted to my car, not even locking the office door behind me. I didn't return for 2 days. I called out sick, told Mr. Griggs I had a stomach bug. He didn't argue, just told me to take care of myself and not miss the third night. When I came back, everything felt heavier, like the place was aware I disobeyed. That's when I realized something important. This job wasn't just about guarding property. It was about guarding myself. From whatever was locked inside those units, or maybe from something much worse that watched through the darkness. And I was starting to think that not every unit held someone's furniture or forgotten antiques. Some of them might be holding something alive and hungry. By the time I returned from my third shift at the Red Bluff storage facility, my nerves were hanging by a thread. The entire drive over, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror like something might suddenly appear in the back seat. That place wasn't just strange. It was changing me, twisting my mind. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours in the last 2 nights. Every creak in my apartment made me jump. Every dark corner seemed to stare back. But I went back anyway. Bills don't care if your job is cursed. When I pulled into the gravel lot at 10:56 p.m., I noticed something strange. The office lights were already on. They shouldn't have been. No one else was supposed to be there. I sat in the car for a minute watching the door. Nothing moved. After debating whether to leave or call Mr. Griggs, I finally stepped out and approached the entrance cautiously. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Then it opened by itself, just a few inches, like it was inviting me in. I swallowed the lump in my throat and pushed it open. The office was empty, neat, as if nothing had happened, except for the phone. It was off the hook, dangling by its cord, swaying slightly back and forth. I walked over and replaced it gently, scanning the room for any sign of forced entry. Nothing. The desk was untouched. The rule sheet was still where I left it. I sat down, rubbing my temples. Then I noticed something else. A new note, folded neatly on top of the monitor. Same faded ink. Same handwriting as the original rules. New Rule 7. If Unit 117 is unlocked at any point, seal the door with salt immediately and do not look inside. Unit 117. The same one from the first rule. I leaned back in the chair, heart racing. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't even gone near it. But why the new rule? Did someone else tamper with it? Another guard? Someone? Or something? At midnight, I made my round, salt shaker in my pocket just in case. Every step felt heavier than the last. The night was too quiet. No wind, no bugs, not even a distant car on the road. When I reached row G, where Unit 117 sat like a rusted coffin in the shadows, I paused. The lock was hanging open. Not broken, not picked. Just open. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my feet carried me forward. I didn't open the door. I didn't even touch it. I knelt down and poured salt in a thick, clumsy line along the base of the unit. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the entire container. As I turned to leave, I heard breathing behind the door. It wasn't human. It was wet, gurgling, like something trying to inhale through a throat full of water. I ran. Back in the office, I slammed the door shut and locked it. I stared at the monitors, but the camera feed for row G had gone black again. Just that one. The rest were fine. I was sweating so badly my shirt clung to my back. My flashlight was still in my hand. I hadn't even realized I'd kept it on the whole time. The clock read 1:27 a.m., almost time for Rule 2. I looked away from the monitors, facing the corner. I didn't want to hear the hum again, but this time it wasn't just a hum. It was voices, whispers layering over each other, like an entire crowd speaking in reverse. They were saying something. At first I couldn't understand. Then it grew clearer. Don't look, don't look, don't look. I covered my ears. It stopped at 1:44 a.m. as usual. When I turned back, the monitor showed someone standing in front of the office, back turned, completely still. I blinked. They were gone. At 2:12 a.m., I shut off the lights like clockwork and waited in the dark. I counted the seconds in my head, tried to control my breathing, but the scratching returned, louder this time. Then something thumped against the side of the office wall, hard enough to rattle the window. I didn't move. I didn't scream. The lights came back on. There was a smear on the glass, long, dirty fingerprints like someone had dragged their hand across it. But the prints were too large, too wide. That night I didn't make it to 3 a.m. I packed up and left at 2:38. I didn't even pretend to finish the shift. The next day, Mr. Griggs called me. "You're not quitting." It wasn't a question. I just needed a break, I stammered. "No one takes a break from this job. You either finish your week or the facility finishes you." Then he hung up. I didn't know what he meant by finish you, but I wasn't about to find out. The next night, I showed up again. I brought a small pouch of salt, a thermos of coffee, and 2 flashlights. I also brought a crucifix, even though I'm not religious. It just felt like the right thing to do. Everything was calm at first, almost peaceful. I made my rounds. No open units, no footsteps, no knocking. But then, around 1 a.m., the phone rang. It wasn't supposed to. The rule was clear. Never answer the phone after 3 a.m. But this wasn't after 3. It was 1. I picked it up slowly. Static. Then a voice, raspy, almost like someone whispering through a clogged pipe. "Unit 117 is awake." I slammed the phone down. I watched the monitors. Row G was blank again. And then I heard footsteps approaching the office. They didn't come from the gravel lot. They came from behind. From the rows. Something was walking up from the shadows. Closer. Louder. I reached under the desk and pulled out the emergency lock bar Briggs had shown me during orientation. I placed it across the door, just in case. The footsteps stopped just outside. I held my breath. Then the door handle turned, creaking under pressure. I didn't move. After a few seconds, the handle stopped. Then, a knock. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I backed away from the door. I wasn't making the same mistake twice. I grabbed my bag, threw on my coat, and bolted through the back exit. As I got into my car, I looked over my shoulder just once. The door to the office was wide open, and standing inside was me. An exact copy, same face, same coat, same haunted eyes, and it smiled. I didn't drive home that night. I didn't even drive far. I ended up parking at a 24-hour gas station 15 miles down the highway where the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and the cashier didn't ask questions. I sat in my car, doors locked, headlights off, watching the dark horizon as if something might crawl out of it. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror for a long time. I checked my face, my hands, my eyes, comparing them to the thing I saw inside the office. It looked just like me, not similar, identical. Same jacket, same scuffed boots, same exhaustion dragging down the corners of my mouth. But its smile didn't match anything I'd ever seen in a mirror. It wasn't human. By the time daylight broke across the Nebraska fields, I had convinced myself I wouldn't go back. But by 8 p.m., I was turning my car around. I don't know if it was guilt, obligation, fear, or something else pulling me back to Red Bluff. Maybe I thought if I faced it, I could take control again, that I could still quit on my terms. I arrived at 10:42 p.m. The office door was closed. The windows were dark. Everything looked normal. I stepped out, heart pounding, expecting to see my double step out to greet me. But the parking lot was empty, only my car and the moonlight. Inside, the office was cold, colder than usual. I walked to the monitor, half expecting another note to be waiting for me, but there was nothing. No new rules, no signs of tampering. But something was different. The cameras. Every row was visible again, including row G. For the first time in nights, I could see Unit 117. The lock looked intact. The area was still. I waited. I watched. Midnight came and went. Nothing. I forced myself to do a full round. I brought salt again, just in case. I even walked past Unit 117 slowly, eyes trained on the ground, pulse hammering in my ears. The air was still. When I passed the unit, I noticed small handprints in the dirt outside it, child-sized. I didn't linger. Back in the office, I checked the clock. 1:33 a.m. Time for Rule 2. This time, I didn't just turn away from the cameras. I turned the entire monitor to face the wall. I sat on the floor, back pressed against the desk, whispering to myself to stay awake. The voices returned. But this time, they weren't whispering, "Don't look." They were calling my name, over and over, sometimes in my own voice, sometimes in the voice of my mother who'd passed away 2 years ago. I covered my ears and shut my eyes, biting down on my tongue just to stay grounded. At 1:44, the voices stopped. When I turned the monitor back around, one of the cameras had changed. Row B. There was a man standing in front of Unit 23, staring at the door. He didn't move, just stood perfectly still, back turned to the camera. Then he raised his hand and knocked. 5 times. I stood slowly, unsure what to do. The knocking wasn't coming from the office. It was coming from the storage yard. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped outside, keeping my eyes on the camera feed through the window. The man on the screen didn't move. I walked to row B, careful with every step. When I turned the corner and reached Unit 23, it was empty. No man, no sign of movement, just the cold. I turned around, and there he was. Not at Unit 23, but 30 feet away, standing between 2 other units, just watching me. I couldn't see his face. The light didn't reach that far. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just watched. He raised his hand again, knocked 5 times on the metal siding beside him. I bolted. By the time I made it back to the office, the figure was gone from the cameras. At 2:12 a.m., I shut off the lights as usual. This time, the scratching turned into tapping, rhythmic, measured, like fingernails on glass. Then a voice whispered from under the desk, "I don't like the salt." My blood went cold. I didn't respond. I didn't move. The lights came back on. There was nothing under the desk, but the salt I had spilled near the door earlier, it was scattered, as if someone had swept through it. I was losing my grip. Every rule, every warning, they weren't just for safety. They were survival instructions, and someone or something was testing how closely I would follow them. At 2:45 a.m., the phone rang. Not just once, over and over. The ringing didn't stop. It kept going and going, shaking the desk. I stared at the clock. It wasn't 3 a.m. yet. It was trying to trick me, but I didn't move. Finally, the ringing stopped. The silence afterward was somehow louder. I sat back, trying to catch my breath. That's when I noticed the mirror. It was small, mounted on the wall behind the filing cabinet. I had never paid attention to it before. Now it showed something I couldn't ignore. In the reflection, I wasn't sitting alone. Something was behind me, leaning over my shoulder. Its face was inches from mine, grinning wide and hollow. But when I turned around, there was nothing there. The reflection lingered a second longer, then faded. By morning, I couldn't feel my legs. I think I sat frozen in the same position for hours. When the sun came up, the building seemed to exhale. The light cut through the darkness like a blade. I gathered my things and walked outside, and found the salt line outside Unit 117 completely disturbed, like someone had danced through it in circles. The door was still locked, but something had been out, waiting. By the time my 4th shift came around, I wasn't the same man who had walked into the Red Bluff storage facility that first night. Something inside me had shifted. I was quieter. My eyes darted constantly, even in daylight. I couldn't explain to friends what was happening, not that I had many left. They wouldn't understand the rules, the whispers, the copies, the thing behind me in the mirror. And worst of all, I had started to question reality. When I arrived that night, I noticed fresh tire marks in the gravel, deep, thick, like someone had left in a hurry. But Mr. Griggs never parked on site, and I hadn't seen any other employees, ever. Inside the office, the rule sheet was gone, all of it. The handwritten list, the updates, the new notes. In its place was a fresh sheet of paper, typed, cold. Rule 1, stop questioning the rules. Rule 2, obedience is safety, doubt is death. Rule 3, they hear you when you think too loudly. Rule 4, don't let them see your fear. They wear it like a mask. I sank into the chair, feeling something unravel in my chest. What the hell did think too loudly even mean? Was that why the voices had started using my mother's voice? Was that why they knew my name? I turned on the monitors. Row G was blank again. The rest looked normal, for now. I walked the rows like usual, flashlight sweeping left to right, footsteps careful. The cold had become unbearable. July in Nebraska shouldn't have felt like December in Siberia, but the air bit into my skin. I could see my breath puffing out in foggy clouds. That's when I saw the girl. She couldn't have been older than 7. Pale, barefoot, wearing a tattered white dress. She stood between units 45 and 46, hands at her sides, face hidden by her long black hair. I froze. She didn't move. Not a twitch. "Hey," I called softly, voice barely above a whisper. She didn't respond. I remembered Rule 3 from the original list. If you see someone walking through the rows after midnight, do not approach them. This wasn't walking. She was standing still. Did the rule still apply? My hand tightened on the flashlight. I took one step closer. The girl raised her head. Her face wasn't human, not deformed, not bloody, just hollow. Her features were smooth and stretched like wax melting too slowly. Her eyes were wide, round, but completely black. Then she screamed. Not with her mouth, with my voice. It was the same pitch, same tone, same echo I heard when I screamed during my first shift. I ran, all the way back to the office. The door slammed shut behind me without touching it. I locked it twice and backed away, breathing hard. When I looked at the monitors, she was gone. Row D now showed something else. A storage unit, open. Unit 117. I hadn't touched it. No one had. But the door was up halfway, and the camera showed pure darkness inside. Not just absence of light, something deeper, like a void. I grabbed the salt pouch from my bag, opened the drawer for the spare, and headed back out. I didn't want to. Every cell in my body screamed to run. But I had to. When I reached Unit 117, I saw drag marks in the dirt, long grooves as if something had been pulled out. Or crawled. The air smelled foul, like rot mixed with burning plastic. I poured salt in a wide arc around the unit and didn't look inside. I couldn't. As I turned to leave, I felt something watching me, from above. Slowly, I tilted my head upward. There was something clinging to the ceiling of the storage unit above mine. Something pale, long, its limbs splayed like a spider. Its mouth opened slowly, revealing rows of human teeth. Hundreds of them. I ran again. I didn't even care that I was breaking rules. I sprinted back, heart in my throat. Back in the office, the phone was ringing. The clock read 3:01 a.m. The rule had been clear from the beginning. Never answer after 3 a.m. But this time it wasn't just ringing. It was vibrating, shaking the desk. Then it stopped. The lights flickered once, then died. The emergency backup kicked in with a soft hum. I stood in the half-light, staring at the now blank monitors. The temperature dropped again. I looked at the mirror on the wall. This time I didn't see myself at all. The mirror showed an empty office. Then the door behind me creaked. I turned around slowly. It was open, even though I had locked it, twice. And standing just outside was Mr. Griggs. Only it wasn't him. His suit was torn. His skin was cracked like old clay. His eyes were black sockets, and his mouth smiled with a grin too wide for any human face. "Leaving early again?" he asked in a voice that sounded like two people speaking at once. I couldn't speak. He stepped forward and the office lights flickered. When they steadied, he was gone. Only the salt pouch remained, burned, melted into the floor. I stared at the monitor again. Now all of them were dark, except one, camera 6, row H. There in the center of the feed was the girl again. This time she was holding something, my flashlight, the one I dropped outside Unit 117. She looked straight into the camera and smiled. Not the waxy, like hollow face from earlier. This time she had my smile, the same crooked grin I had as a kid in old school photos. And behind her, just barely visible in the grainy footage, was something large, crawling, towering over her like a shadow draped in teeth. The feed went black, and I realized something terrifying. The rules weren't just there to protect me. They were feeding it, keeping it inside, and I had broken almost every one. I didn't leave the facility that morning. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke up slumped against the office door, knees pressed to my chest like a child hiding from a monster under the bed. Light streamed through the windows, cutting across the floor in long golden shafts. The sun had come up, and I was still alive. Barely. My head throbbed. My mouth was dry. My memories felt like shattered glass scattered across the floor of my mind. The girl, the mimic, the creature clinging to the ceiling, Mr. Griggs, or whatever was pretending to be him. I didn't know what was real anymore. I dragged myself to the sink in the back of the office and splashed cold water on my face. The mirror was still cracked from the night before, but it didn't show anything unusual now. No watchers, no false reflections, just me, hollow-eyed and broken. There was a folded piece of paper wedged under the office door. I picked it up with trembling hands. It read, "Tonight is the last night. You must finish the cycle, or the cycle will finish you." No signature, no explanation, but somehow I knew it was true. When I returned that night, everything felt wrong. The gravel didn't crunch beneath my boots, the wind didn't blow, even the air was still, like the entire world had stopped breathing. Inside the office, the monitors were dead. All of them. The power light on the system blinked slowly, but no images came through. I rebooted the feed twice, checked the cables. Nothing helped. It was like the facility had closed its eyes. There was a new list waiting on the desk. Short, handwritten again. Only 3 rules this time. 1, don't speak after midnight, not even to yourself. 2, walk the rows counterclockwise at exactly 1 a.m. 3, if you see yourself again, finish what was started. No explanations, just dread. I paced the office, watching the clock tick toward midnight. My hands shook. I was beyond fear now, numb, like I'd already died and hadn't noticed. When the hour struck, a low groan echoed through the yard. It sounded like the metal itself was in pain. I covered my mouth, barely suppressing the scream that rose in my throat. I didn't speak. I didn't make a sound. I made it until 1 a.m. without incident. Then I stepped outside. The wind returned, strong, angry. Dust whipped through the rows like a sandstorm from nowhere. I pulled my jacket tighter and began walking, counterclockwise, just like the rule said. Each step felt harder than the last. The units seemed taller, closer together, like the facility was shrinking around me. The rows twisted in unnatural ways, bending toward each other like hunched shoulders. Halfway through row D, I saw myself again, standing still, not moving. It was me, but wrong. Its skin was cracked and red like dried blood. Its eyes were all pupil, black, endless. It was barefoot, its toes digging into the dirt. I didn't run. I knew this was it. Rule 3, if you see yourself again, finish what was started. It took me a moment to understand. The cycle. Every night had been building to this. The first knock, the salt, the mirror, the mimic, all leading here. I stepped closer. My double cocked its head slightly. I raised the flashlight slowly and smashed it across its face. It didn't bleed. It cracked, like porcelain. The mimic didn't scream. It reached for me silently, grasping with long, desperate fingers. I kicked it back and struck again, harder this time. The skin shattered. Black smoke poured from the cracks in its face. It fell, and something inside it howled, not with sound but with thought. A wave of agony and rage crashed into my mind, like someone screaming inside my skull. Then, silence. It melted into the dirt. The ground around it turned ashen, cold. I stood still, breathing hard, covered in sweat. My hands shook violently. The wind died. The air warmed. The facility sighed. I returned to the office and found the monitors online again. All feeds restored. Every row looked peaceful, still. Even Unit 117 was sealed, its door welded shut with thick chains, padlocked and glowing faintly under the moonlight. I slumped into the chair and watched the screens. For once there were no figures, no whispers, no rules. Just me, alone, in a dead silent facility. At 2:12 a.m. I turned off the lights as I always did. No scratching, no tapping, only darkness. Then just before I flipped the lights back on, I heard a knock. Only one. Soft, behind me. I didn't move. The lights came back. There was no one there, but a final note had been placed on the desk. The mimic is gone. You remain. Choose carefully what you become. I stared at it for a long time. My reflection in the darkened monitor no longer looked unfamiliar, but I couldn't help wondering, was I the real me? Or just the last one standing? It's hard to explain what it feels like when the rules stop. Like a room without oxygen, a silence too deep, the absence of something you hated, but also relied on. The rules at Red Bluff had kept me afraid, yes, but they'd also kept me alive. Now I wasn't sure if I was free or if I was next. The night after I destroyed the mimic, there were no new notes, no updated rules, no visitors. The monitors worked, the unit stayed closed, not a single whisper, not a single knock. The calm didn't feel like peace, it felt like a trap, and maybe I was already caught in it. At 11:30 p.m., I walked the yard, not because I had to, because I couldn't sit still. The wind had returned to normal, cool but gentle. The moon lit the metal rows with a dull shine. The unit sat quiet, undisturbed. I stopped in front of Unit 117. The lock was still there. But now, someone or something had carved a word into the steel with long, uneven scratches. Remember. I didn't want to. I still don't. Inside the office, I made coffee and stared at the monitors. My reflection blinked when I blinked. Nothing crawled across the screen. For the first time in 6 nights, I didn't feel like I was being hunted. But that didn't mean I was safe. At 1:33 a.m., the old danger window, I turned away from the cameras anyway, just to be sure. Force of habit. The hum didn't return, but something else did. A soft sound. Not in the air, but in my head. A lullaby. It was familiar. So familiar it made my eyes sting. My mother used to hum it when I was small, something about stars and windows and goodnight wishes. But she never sang it in reverse, and that's how I heard it now, twisted, pulled backward through the coils of memory like a fishhook. I stood up fast, knocking the chair over. I wasn't alone. My reflection on the darkened monitor screen was humming too. But I wasn't. It smiled, and then it spoke, using my voice. You ended one cycle, but you stepped into another. I unplugged the monitor. The screen went black. The silence came roaring back. I paced the room like an animal in a cage. My thoughts looped over and over. If the mimic is gone, what's this? If I'm still here, why isn't it over? At 2:12 a.m., I didn't turn off the lights. I broke the rule. I sat perfectly still, staring at the door, and that's when I noticed something terrifying. The door wasn't the same one I'd locked earlier. The handle was on the wrong side. I was in a mirror version of the office. I stood up and backed toward the desk. My hands trembled. Everything inside the room looked right, but off. A little too clean, a little too still, like a memory trying too hard to be remembered. There was a knock, but not at the door, at the window. I turned slowly. There I was again, looking in from the outside, same eyes, same hair, same jacket. But my double's mouth was stitched shut with black thread. It raised one hand and pointed at something behind me. I spun. Unit 117 was open again, on every monitor. Except now the void inside it was glowing, pulsing with red light, and something was crawling out. Not fast, not frantic, slow, purposeful. I grabbed the emergency key bundle and bolted out of the mirror office into the night air, hoping, praying I hadn't waited too long. The sky above the facility was darker than I'd ever seen it. Not just clouded, but starless, as if something above had covered the heavens with a sheet. The red light was real. It spilled down Row G, casting long shadows on the gravel. I followed it to Unit 117. It was wide open, and the salt line was gone, erased. Inside was a staircase, going down. I didn't think. I descended. The stairs felt wrong underfoot, soft, like flesh. The air was thick, and each breath tasted like rust and mold. The hallway at the bottom pulsed with light, heartbeat light. And all along the walls were names, hundreds, maybe thousands, all first names, all written in smeared ink, and one of them was mine. I walked past it, down the corridor, until I reached a chamber with a single thing inside it, a mirror, framed in bone. When I looked into it, I didn't see myself. I saw every version of me that had come before. The me who ran on the first night, the me who stayed and obeyed, the one who broke rules, the one who became the mimic. They were all here, watching, waiting. A voice mine but older echoed from the mirror. You are the last, now choose. The mirror offered 2 reflections. One, me as I was now, frightened, human. The other, me with black eyes, cracked skin, stitched mouth. The mimic. I reached forward and touched the glass, and it shattered. I woke up in the office chair. Sunlight streaming in. All monitors normal. The coffee pot full. No signs of damage. No notes. No whispers. I checked Unit 117. Still locked. Still sealed. But something felt different inside me. A buzzing beneath the skin. A hum in my bones. And when I smiled at my reflection in the office window, I noticed something. My smile was just a little too wide.